When we study science, and especially molecular sciences, it's very common for us to categorize a whole series of things as just being really unimaginably small. So when people talk about the atomic scale, or the molecular scale, or proteins in cells, we often just group those things together and consider them as just really small things. But this video is going to be all about getting an appreciation that even though all the things I've just mentioned are really small, there's actually a really significant difference between the sizes of those things. So hopefully this can give an insight into how complex a cell can be and how all the machinery that it's composed of plays its role into creating a living organism, or at least part of a living organism, since some species of life, such as humans, are made of many cells. So the first scale that we'll take a look at is the molecular scale. Here, we can see a water molecule on the screen. As we've seen this structure multiple times before in previous videos, we know that an oxygen atom will be present somewhere in between the two smaller hydrogen atoms. So this molecule is going to be approximately 0.275 nanometers in diameter. Just to remind ourselves, a nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. Even with that incomprehensible number in view, we have to now process that a water molecule isn't even half of a nanometer and is nearly a quarter of a nanometer. So now as we move on to the next scale, we can see an example of a protein here on the screen, and it is known as hemoglobin. So to give a sense of scale, the average diameter of a hemoglobin protein is around 5 nanometers, also known as 5/1000th of a meter. This means that 200 million hemoglobin proteins in a line would have a length of just 1 meter. So that seems super small, and so it may seem like it's alright to categorize something like this as a super small object, which it is. But we have to consider the fact that this protein is much larger than a water molecule. The hemoglobin is around 18 times larger than the water molecule, and we've only gone up by one scale. So even when you go from something like a water molecule to a protein, we're already dramatically going up in size and complexity. We've talked about the unique structures of protein in previous videos, in which we saw all the interesting forms that these proteins can take and still do surprisingly complex and important tasks continuously in biological systems. So now the next scale that we're going to analyze is a virus. Pseudomonas aeruginosa is a fairly common virus that infects plants and humans, causing damage in various parts of the body. The size of this virus is about 500 nanometers, or half a micrometer. As you may have inferred from that, 1000 nanometers is equivalent to 1 micrometer. So this means that the virus is about 100 times the size of a hemoglobin protein, and at this scale, the water molecule would already be invisible. And yet, we would still need 2 million Pseudomonas cells in a line to get a length of 1 meter. The next scale up is going to be of this very abstract looking image on the screen, which is known as a T cell. So now the Pseudomonas aeruginosa virus that we were talking about would only be about 2% the size of this cell. For this reason, the virus cells would be minuscule compared to the seemingly immense T cell. The hemoglobin protein would probably be the size of a pixel on this scale, and the water molecule would be long gone. A T cell can also be known as a lymphocyte, with an average diameter of 5 to 7 micrometers. So as we keep going up on these scales, we no longer need to use nanometers and can now comfortably use micrometers. On a relatively similar scale to the T cell are the red and white blood cells. The red blood cell and T cell are roughly the exact same size, but the white blood cells are significantly larger at about triple the size, and are about 15 micrometers in diameter, or 15 millionths of a meter. So as you may have known, hemoglobin is the protein that allows red blood cells to transport oxygen throughout the body. So in each of the 7 micrometer wide red blood cells, there will be roughly 280 million hemoglobin proteins. So that statement is far ahead of our ability to even comprehend. Red blood cells are something that are impossible to see with our eyes and are considered microscopic, and trying to imagine 280 million hemoglobin proteins inside of each red blood cell is impossible to imagine. So hopefully these variety of scales that we've now seen give you an appreciation of the complete difference in size of even the most minuscule things, and how all of these things that we normally group together as too small to see are drastically different from each other. So now after these examples, I hope that when you hear the molecular scale and the cellular scale, for example, you'll have an idea as to how much larger the cellular scale really is. This is what makes cells so interesting. The fact that they're still so tiny and yet so complex that they are considered sustainable life forms is unfathomable to us. Humans are made of roughly 30 trillion cells working collaboratively with designated roles to create the insanely complex beings that us humans are. When you look at even a human hair, it's already difficult to decipher the width of it, and yet the width is made of about a dozen cells. So as we enter our cells unit and look at the details of all the varieties of cells present in biological systems, we should always take into account the fact of how immense and yet minuscule these fabulous structures are at the same time. But for now, I thank you all for watching.